Hi, welcome to episode 485 of the Corner of Knit and Tea. My name is Laura. I'm also known as Fluffy Kira on Twitter, Instagram, and Blue Sky. I blog over at thecornerofknitandtea.com, which is where this episode and every episode show notes will be. I have an Etsy shop where I sell my handspun yarn and knitting patterns, and that is also called the Corner of Knit and Tea. Hi, how are you? It is Monday, July 29th. I was just checking the date. I cannot believe that July is almost over, but here we are. I hope that you are doing well. I am coming to you from the Kansas City metro area. I live on the Kansas side, just a little bit outside the city, and I hope that you are having a lovely day today. It is warm here. Actually, I'm finding myself a little toasty, so I'm going to take off my sweatshirt. Usually, well, we keep air conditioning going all summer long because it is hot and humid in the Midwest, and I think we're supposed to have some record-breaking heat this week. I went outside briefly to put a couple packages in the mailbox, and it was quite toasty out there. So I hope that you're doing well. I had a really nice week and then a little bit of a crazy weekend. So my husband went and did Ragbri last week, which I don't remember what the first three letters stand for, but the others stand for Bike Ride Across Iowa. So he basically went from the west to the east of Iowa, and he was gone all week. I took him up last Saturday before I talked to you on Monday, and then this Saturday I went up and got him. And so I had a nice week to myself. I watched lots of movies. I did lots of crafting, not so much knitting. I don't have any of that to show you today, but I have a few other things to show you. And then on Saturday, I drove up to Iowa to get him and had a little bit of surprise crafty tourism. I went up to get him, planning to pick him up about 2, and then turns out he wasn't going to be ready until close to 4, and he wasn't in the area where I was supposed to meet him. And since it was 2 o'clock on a Saturday afternoon and I was already there, I knew that I could probably find some craft stores. So I just Googled to figure out yarn stores in near Des Moines, Iowa, and found a yarn and quilting nook, and it was lovely. It's called Off the Rails, and it was in, I think, Baldicourt, Iowa. It was just a little bit northeast of Altoona and the Des Moines area, and it was lovely. I spent about half an hour enjoying their air conditioning and browsing, and of course I came home with a little bit of fabric and a quilt pattern. It was really cool. They had a whole wall of postcards that showed quilt patterns. It was a picture of the quilt on the front, and then on the back were quick directions, like how much fabric you needed and how to like make and assemble the quilt all in one. And the postcard itself was like $1.50, $2. So it was great. It was like all these little patterns that you could make. So I picked some fabric and a pattern, and so that will be upcoming on my list of projects. I'm not being so, I'm being good and bad. I said that I didn't want to come up with a huge quilting stash, and I don't have a huge quilting stash, and to be fair, everything I have bought so far is I have picked out a project that I have in mind, or almost everything I've bought so far. And so this one, I bought the fabric with a project in mind, and I'm ready to go whenever I'm ready to go. But I still have like 3 or 4 quilt quantities waiting. So I'm not 100% good on the buy it as I need it. So yeah. So that was a really long day. I got up at about 8 o'clock in the morning. I had breakfast with a friend. I drove up to Iowa. I killed a lot of time in Iowa waiting for my husband, and then we drove home, and we did not get home till after 10 p.m. And I was hungry and hangry. And then yesterday, we kind of just putzed about the house, and I did a little bit of crafting. My book club met. So it's not been quite the relaxing start to the week that I was hoping for, but it was a lovely week last week. And then the Olympics started on Friday. And I watched the opening ceremonies, and I didn't end up watching that much Olympics over the weekend because I was gone so much. But my plan is to sit down and craft and enjoy the Olympics this week. I am not picking a project to do as I have in years past, or Olympics past, because I'm not really sure how I'm going to feel and what I'm going to want to do. But I do plan to get some knitting done this week and some knitting done for myself. My arm is still bothering me, and I made an appointment with the physical therapist, but she can't see me until next week. So I am going to try and take it easy this week, but I'm not gonna not knit entirely because I just want to knit a little bit, and if the answer is that my arm is a little achy, I'm just going to put up with it for this week. So that's kind of a how things are, the state of things. Let's go into the official podcast. Today I am drinking London tea from the tea house. It's just a good basic black tea, and I was joking to myself as I got this that like a basic black tea is a little bit like a basic black dress. Like it's good for any time, anywhere. It's got a little bit of caffeine. It's just nice. This is Darjeeling and Ceylon, and so I'm just having a good basic black tea in my oy vey all day, which seems perfect for a Monday. I know I've said that before too, but it does seem perfect for a Monday. So, and I'm working on a big report, and I'm taking just a brief break around lunchtime. So I will oy vey all day back to my report when I'm done here. So I have I have a finished object, an almost finished object, and a brand new project in process that I haven't really talked to you about. So let's just talk about those things. We're going to start with embroidery. There's been no knitting, there's been no spinning. I did finish my embroidery piece, and I am so pleased with this one. This might be my favorite one that I've done this far, and this is what it looks like. So this was a lavender, I've been calling it Lavender Fields. It doesn't really have a name. It was a pattern that I purchased on Etsy, and I got it on sale actually, and then I printed it on paper, tracing paper that you could stitch through right onto the fabric, and then I just bought some plain Kona black cotton, and the other thing that I'm really proud about is, so I bought the pattern and I bought the fabric because I needed the fabric, but I used all the colors that were in my floss box. So I didn't buy any colors for this, and it didn't end up looking quite like the sample. The sample had slightly more pinky purples, and I did have a few colors that got real close to each other, but like the blue was kind of close to the gray, which is kind of close to some of the light greens that I put in here, and so I really thought it ended up being a nice color palette, and I really love the way it pops against the black. So I didn't use the colors called for, although the pattern, when you buy it from Etsy, it comes in a variety of sizes, which I thought was really nice. It comes, basically she just made the design bigger, so it comes with a PDF that's several pages, so you can do like for a 3-inch hoop, a 4-inch hoop, a 5-inch hoop, a 6-inch hoop. I think this is a 7-inch hoop, and I think I might have done the 6-inch design, but I can't remember precisely. And on there, she actually shows what color DMC floss she used in hers. Again, so I did deviate from the pattern in the sense that I just used what I had on hand, and I think you could easily do that. And then the other thing, the one thing that I deviated was I deviated from these flowers. And I don't know if I discussed it with you. I don't know if I remember if I discussed it with you last week. These flowers were kind of circles in the original, and this is what I ended up doing with it. I did a couple series of loops in a light and dark color, and then I did some French knots at the center. These were like circles, and they had sort of covered the circles coming out from the center and to the outer edge, and I had done it in a dark purple and had added a few other things, and I really did not like it. I don't know why, it just didn't do it for me, and so I actually cut it out of the fabric. I didn't cut all in the fabric, but I cut all the stitching off the fabric, and then I went back and kind of redid it. And I think if I come down to it, this one is probably my favorite one, but I did 3 of them that were similar. I did all different colors on the insides, but I kind of just did a bunch of loops, and so that is finished. It's almost finished. All the stitching is finished. Now what I need to do is just sew and trim the excess fabric on the back side, and then go ahead and put a piece of flannel on it. And the reason that I haven't done that is, one, because so I put paper on here, and I was able to rip most of the paper off, but it actually also will dissolve in water, and so there are some little bits of the tracing paper that are stuck under the flowers. You might be able to see a little bit in there. I don't know, there are a few spots, I think in here where the stitches got close. Anyway, I would like to, I'm gonna soak it in the sink with just a little bit of Eucalan to kind of get that paper to dissolve. And then I will probably just steam the piece a little bit to make it flat, and then I will decide if I'm keeping it in this larger hoop or if I'm going to take it back down to a slightly smaller hoop. And I might take it down to a 6-inch hoop. I'm pretty sure I did the 6-inch design, and what I'm holding is a 7-inch hoop. So it's not finished yet, but all the actual stitching work is finished. And I still have not gotten my husband to help me hang them, but that will be on the list, although not this upcoming weekend because we're traveling. But so that is my embroidery finished. I do not have another embroidery piece started yet. Oh, I can see a little bit of paper in here. it's tempting to just try and pull all the paper out like I just did. I pulled a little bit out just right up here, just the little bits of paper, but I also will just wash it to get rid of the last few because I also don't want to pull the stitching unduly. Anyway, so that is what I've got going on there. I do have another kit that I purchased, which I could start, or I have been giving some thought to another project. I found a pattern designer on Etsy who does monochromatic designs. So she does monthly designs, and each design is in a color. So red, green, blue, turquoise, and then she has a variety of different shades in each color. And so each one is kind of a color study, but it's also things that happened that month, or just fun designs, and they're pretty decent sized designs. And so I thought about one of the things that I thought about maybe doing all of them, which would be 12 designs, which is a lot. And then I was trying to decide what I would want to do, if I would want to do them like for a wall or whatnot. And my husband actually had a really good idea. And he suggested, what if I did like all 12 designs and then put them together into a quilt, which I think would be really, really cool. And it would be a way to kind of combine the embroidery and the quilting and not just have 12 million separate hoops. And it would give me kind of something to work on and work towards in the next year, rather than just kind of having little one-offs. So I am still thinking about that. First of all, she hasn't released all the designs for the year. I don't think they'll all be out until November. She's got January through August right now. And the second thing is that I have to decide kind of how I want to do that. What color I want to embroider the designs on, probably white, but then also how I think I want to put them together in a quilt, because it could influence what kind of fabric I choose to put the designs on in the first place. If I decide to put them on like a slightly patterned fabric or something that I'm going to use more into the quilt, am I going to add them together with sashing? How big do I want them to be? Those kinds of things, like what ultimately am I going for? And so I'm trying to kind of think through a little bit of that ahead of the project. So there's probably a little bit more planning in that one. So I don't think I'm going to start another embroidery piece right away, but you never know. I'm hoping maybe I can get some knitting in. And I have been kind of on a quilting kick too, which is what I will move to next. So that is my finished embroidery piece, and to be continued on that one. So I spent a lot of time while my husband was away quilting, and that was kind of the big thing that I wanted to get done and get into. And so the first thing that I did, it's not complete, although it is almost complete. I specifically left it undone for a reason. So I finished quilting this quilt, and so I showed you a little bit last week. I was doing kind of some zigzag pieces and some all kinds of stuff, and I finished pulling out all the old stitching, and I finished quilting it. And then what I did is I attached the binding. I'm using the same binding and backing as the last quilt, so it's this nice stripy stuff that's got some greens and aquas that kind of matches some of the stuff that you see in the fabrics here. And so I attached the binding on the front side. So on the front side, it is sewn to the quilt. And then what I did is I ironed it and I folded it over and I clipped it down on the back side. So the way I'm going to finish this is I'm actually going to hand stitch the binding on the back. Now, the reason that I didn't finish this is because, like I said, I've been having some issues with my wrist. And this weekend, my husband and I are driving up to Chicago to see my sister and her children. And it is about a 7-hour drive each direction. And I knew that I would want to be doing something in the car because my husband always drives and I always craft. And I knew that I couldn't knit the whole time. And so my thought was I could probably work on the binding in a few different sets, like work on it for an hour or two at the first morning and then a little bit in the afternoon, and then work on it on the way home. And so I decided that I would save the hand sewing on this so that I could just do it in the car, because it is an easy thing to do in the car, and it is a way that I can kind of craft. And we usually listen to books on tape or music or something, and we chat, and so it is a way that I can craft even though I may not be able to knit for hours in the car. So that is why it is unfinished, but by the time I speak to you next, it will be finished because it is very, very close to being done. So that is my second quilt, and then I will need to find a place to donate. I'm thinking I might end up just going with Project Linus because it is easy and I can donate it at any one of the hospitals here, or there are several hospitals in the city that I can donate it to, and we also have Children's Mercy. I can see if they are taking donations. So that was kind of a fun project. I started that in April. doing children's quilts. Originally, the cause was for kids who are in foster care, giving them quilts, and they were soliciting quilts in a variety of sizes, and it was a cause that Missouri Star was supporting and suggesting that people donate quilts to, and I wasn't able to finish in that time, and I don't know if they're still accepting, like they have a big drive in the April is the month to quilt, because then in May you ship the quilts to them and then they turn them over and donate them. So there are any number of great causes for donating quilts to, so I am sure that I will find a great place to donate it. But that has been fun and some good practice for me in terms of different quilting methods, and I am happy that those are done and that I get to move on to new things. So right before I started those quilts, I don't know if I talked to you about it much, but I had started a new quilt project, again, to teach myself some skills and for practice. I had fallen prey to, sometimes I am a sucker for a mystery buy. You know, when somebody sells mystery bags of yarn or mystery fabric, sometimes I'm like, oh yeah, that could be fun. I think that could be so fun. And then sometimes, you know, with the luck of the draw, sometimes what you get is something that you really like and can see yourself using, and sometimes what you get is not quite what you anticipated, and it's not your style. Like, there's nothing wrong with it, it's just not really your style. And so I got this package of Henry Glass fabric. It's very almost like shabby chic or very vintagey. It was lots of floral patterns, and then it had one with like bicycles and trucks and snowflakes and like all these different things, and it was red and white, so it's like kind of an almost red burgundy and then a cream, and so it was like two colors and a bunch of different patterns, and I didn't really know what I wanted to do with it. And I showed a friend of mine, and she said, you know, red and white is a really great classic half square triangle quilt. And a half square triangle is basically a square that is made up of two triangles. So it's basically two triangles of fabric sewn together on the diagonal, and then you end up with a square where one side is one color and one side is the other color. And when you make a whole bunch of half square triangles, and there are lots of different methods to make them, like you literally can sew two triangles together, but you can also, because of the beauty of geometry, take two squares and sew them together in many different ways to produce different numbers. So for instance, I could sew two squares together with two lines down the center, and I could cut it in half, and then I would have two half square triangles. And there are other methods to make 4 at a time and 8 at a time, and actually even 16 or 32 at a time, although I've never tried to make that many. Anyway, the method that I decided to use was for 8 at a time, and I made a whole bunch of half square triangles. Now, once you have your half square triangles, you can turn them into a lot of different patterns, because depending on what colors you are putting together, you can kind of create different visuals. So you could do pinwheels, where, you know, you have your dark on one side and your light on the other, and you're rotating by 90 degrees. You could do chevrons, where you align the colors together so that they create sort of your chevron stripes. Or you could create any number of patterns. And what I decided to do was, what I should say is, before I started the baby quilts, the children's quilts, what I had done was I had started to sew together my half triangles. And I had basically taken a bunch of 10-inch layer cake squares and sewn them together in such a way as to get 8 triangles per set of layer cake squares. So I had one red square and one white square, and I put them together, and I sewed several seams, and then I cut them up, so I got 8 resulting half square triangles out of them. And then I could arrange them in any number of ways. And so I had sewn all of the squares that I needed into half square triangle units. What I hadn't done was I hadn't cut them all open, and I hadn't ironed them open yet. I'd done maybe half of them, and then I stopped because I got involved in this other thing. And at that point, I didn't know my arm was going to act up. I thought I was going to be able to quilt a couple quilts real fast and then go back. But, you know, it's funny because I have watched the Yarn Harlot speak a few different times and her books, and she says, you know, you just never know when you're going to like put a project down and go to the kitchen to grab a snack and not come back until 6 months later. And so I came back, not 6 months later, but a good 3 or 4 months later, and was like, okay, I need to do more sewing, I need to do more. And what I figured out was that I needed to cut more and I needed to iron. And so I finished cutting my triangles apart and ironing them open, and I finished all of that in one afternoon. And I was like, oh, now I actually have all of what I need to make my quilt. And so I started laying out the squares in the triangles to create a bunch of different patterns and kind of audition them. And the one that I settled on is sort of, I mean, I believe the pattern that it's called Around the World. And what it is you organize them so that basically your colors are making diamonds. So I organized my triangles so that like I have a center diamond that's white, and then the next set is red, and then the next set is white, and the next set is red. And a lot of times Around the World is done sort of where you have the diamond at the very center of your quilt, and then you just build out from there. But what I did was I sort of modernized it a little bit, and I'm sure there are quilting patterns that are written. I didn't end up using a pattern. I just ended up with whatever size half square triangles I ended up with based on the squares that I started with, and then I just laid them out in a pattern that I liked. And so mine is kind of off center, and I'm going to show you what I have together so far. So I had it all laid out. What I am doing is I am doing a 9 square by 9 square, and the squares are between about 4 3/4 and 5 inches. So ultimately what I'm going to have is around a 40-ish by 40-ish quilt. It might be a little bit more than that. Well, no, it won't be, because they're not quite, well, if they're 5, it would be 45, somewhere between 40 and 45 inches a side, which is basically what I want for my quilting wall. So this will be kind of a wall hanging and maybe sort of a little bit of a lap quilt, but it's probably going to be a little too small to be a lap quilt. Anyway, what I did is I laid out all the squares on the table, so 9 by 9, and it just barely fit on my dining room table, and then I started assembling. And the way I decided to assemble is I decided to do something that's called chain piecing. And when you chain piece, you sew things together, and you kind of sew the similar seams together, one after the other, and you don't cut your thread in between. And it saves you a little bit of time, and it also saves you a little bit of thread because you're not cutting your threads in between. And ultimately, I'm going to have like one big piece, and I'll show you how that works. So I have 5 of my columns sewn together, so I still have 4 more to go. And what we are looking at is, let me get it. Okay, so this is the top, let me think about this. This is the top left corner. And what I have is I have my quilt kind of chain pieced. So you can see I started right here in the middle with the diamond, and then it's red, and then it's a white diamond. And so this is going to go all the way down. So it continues kind of echoing all the way down. And what I did was, the first thing I did was I took column 1 and attached it to column 2. And then I took in row 2, column 1 and attached to column 2. And row 3 and column 2. And row 4, column 1 and column 2. And first I did that, and then I went and did 3 to 2 and 3 to 2. And so you can see that with my chain piecing, I have all of those threads in there, and it's holding it together. So I more or less have the bit of my top. Now, when I get all the way across and I attach 9 all the way across, then I will fold this one down and attach this one to row 2. And then when I finish that and those are sewn together, I will fold 2 down and attach to row 3. And I will continue assembling that way. And I will never need to cut all of the things, but I will also never need to worry that I'm not assembling it in the correct order. So that's just kind of a nifty way to do things, and I'm hoping that when I get done, all of my edges are going to match up. I've been trying to be careful here. My squares are not all 100% the same size, so they may or may not meet up as necessary, but I am hoping to finish that top fairly quickly. My hope is that I can sew for the next couple nights, and then that top will be finished, and then I will have to decide what I want to do with it. I bought some green backing fabric, and so my thought was, since it's kind of a red and white traditional, I thought that I might put some green backing and then do a green binding around the edge, and that might be my pseudo Christmas season quilt. It's not Christmas fabric. As I told you, it's got all kinds of different prints. So it's got florals, and it's got, this is just vines. This is almost like a honeycomb with a floral. This is like, it's either snowflakes or it almost looks like jacks to me, like when you play with jacks. This is like horseshoes and arrows. This is kind of almost like, it reminds me of wallpaper paneling. More flowers, more flowers, more flowers. I'm trying to think what else I have on here that I can show you the trucks if I can find one. Oh, here's the one with the trucks. So yeah, so, and it's got cream and some that are a little bit whiter and some that are red and some that are almost a little burgundy. And I just kind of used those all interchangeably in here. So it will be roughly red and white. But, and then the other thing was I tried not to be too precious about how I put things together. But other than the center, where I did actually use some similar squares to kind of make it, go together, everything else, I managed to fix it so that I don't have two of the same fabrics touching at any point. They might be near each other, but they are never touching. So I tried, like I said, I tried not to be too precious about it. And what I did is I made, ultimately I made 88 triangles because so what I did is I had 10-inch layer cake squares and I took one red and one white and I did 11 sets of them. So that's 22 squares total. That's half my, or roughly half my, a layer cake has 42, squares. So I took 22 squares and I turned them into 11 sets of 8 square triangles, so half square triangles. So that's 88 half square triangles. And then I had one where I cut it a little bit wrong and one where it came out a little smaller. And so I sort of pieced my top together with the best of them. And then I just had a few triangles left over. And then I think for the back, I'm just going to do the plain flat green. It's just kind of it's a mottled green. I can't remember what I got. It might be a Moda Grunge, but I can't remember. It's like a pine green, and it's got a little bit of texture on it, but it doesn't have any particular pattern. So I think I'm just going to do the straight backing on it and then just do the binding. And I don't know what quilting pattern I'm going to do. That I haven't decided yet. I can't decide if I'm going to do some free motion. Or if what I want to do is do some line quilting and basically just echo these lines. So I will say the only thing about this one that has been a little difficult and not entirely for the faint of heart is that when I start to put my rows together, I am going to want my points to match up really well so that I don't have like weird extra bits. So like right here, I got the point to match up really, really well. And you can also see that that's like roughly a 1/4 inch down. So if I seam that appropriately, you will just see like the perfect point there. I would expect that I will not have perfect points at every juncture on the quilt, but my hope is that most of them will be passably decent so that it's not super obvious that I didn't join everything appropriately. So my hope is that I'll be able to do that and also mitigate any slight differences in square size by doing appropriate seaming. So really pinning and keeping an eye on where my seams are. So that is the quilt that is in progress. I don't expect, well, this might be done, the top part might be done by the time I next see you. So I mentioned that I'm going out of town. I am going to take next week off because we will be driving home on Monday. And I don't think I will have time to do a podcast and I don't know how much I'll have done. So I'm going to take next Monday off, which means the next time that I will see you is Monday, August 12th. And by then I think I will probably have the top finished. So I will be able to show you what it looks like. I'm sure that I won't have started quilting it yet. But my hope is that I can finish sewing all the columns together this week before we leave and then maybe even start to assembling the rows. But if I don't get to the rows, I'll do that the weekend after we get back. So that is what I have been crafting on. I've managed to kill 28 minutes talking about embroidery and quilting and no knitting. So I apologize for those of you who come here for the knitting. My plan is to work on both, I have a pair of socks in progress and I have that Joji Locatelli hipster top. And my plan is to hopefully work a little bit on those every day this week so that I can make just, even if I just do a few rows a day, it will make a little bit of progress. And my hope is that maybe I'll be able to wear that tee by the end of the month. And if I finish the socks, then I'll be able to wear them come fall, which interestingly enough is only probably another month and a half away. I mean, I guess it's not technically till mid-September, and we still have lots more heat to come, but usually sometime early to mid-August, I start feeling the siren call of winter sweaters. So my hope is that maybe I'll finish another tee before I get there. So I hope that you are having a lovely week and that you are enjoying crafting whatever you are doing. And I will say until I see you in 2 weeks, happy knitting, happy spinning, happy embroidering, quilting, and of course sipping. And I'll see you in 2 weeks' time. Bye.